Hello there, I'm Black Bright News, and today's topic is when concerns are ignored. So, I'm going to read from my notes. I hope you like this kind of style of communicating with you. I kind of find it easier, it's less stressful, as long as I keep within the time frame. So, yes, let's begin. When ignored concerns can lead to tragedy. That's what I've titled it. Some stories don't leave you. You read them once, hear them once, and sometimes something inside you shifts. Because these aren't stories about systems, they're stories about people. People who trusted institutions meant to protect them and were met with silence, indifference, or something far worse. Let me take you into these lives for a moment. Not the headlines, not the inquiries, the human beings inside the story. Now imagine being the parent of a child who never comes home. Now imagine your grief being magnified by the very people meant to bring you justice. That was Stephen Lawrence's family. They weren't just fighting for the truth about their son. They were fighting to be taken seriously. Fighting against a police force that looked at them, a black family, and chose suspicion over compassion. And then we had Hillsborough. Think of the parents and children waiting outside hospitals, clutching photographs, praying for names that never appeared. They were grieving, while police were editing their own statements, trying to shift the blame away from themselves. It's hard to overstate the pain of being hurt by the person who's supposed to help you. It's a different kind of sound, a deeper one. Then picture a mother in Grenfell Tower, late at night, the lift breaking again, the fire alarms not working, the feeling, that maternal instinct that something isn't safe. She writes emails, goes to meetings, speaks to the managers, but she's treated as a nuisance. A complainer, someone to pacify, not someone to protect or take seriously. And then one night she wakes to smoke. Or the family of Awab Ishak, a tiny boy choking on mould spores in a damp flat. His parents cleaned, complained, documented, begged. Awab's mother said, "I knew something was wrong, but nobody listened." There's a special agony in knowing you did everything you could and still lost your child because someone else just couldn't be bothered. And then we have the health service, full of dedicated, extraordinary people, but leadership failures have caused heartbreak that should have never happened. In mid-Staffordshire, imagine being an elderly patient, pressing the call button for water and nobody comes. Or being a daughter, walking into the ward and seeing your mum dehydrated, scared and alone. Because staffing targets charts mattered more than listening to nurses. What about the contaminated blood scandal? Thousands given HIV and hepatitis. Parents watching their children weaken, waste away, with no idea that the danger came from the hospital, not the illness. And then the Lucy Letby case, consultants lying awake at night, knowing babies were dying and begging management to listen. Instead of action, they were told to apologise, to stop undermining the trust. Imagine being a nurse or a doctor who sees a pattern but is silenced for telling the truth. Imagine the guilt of knowing more lives were lost because people in power refused to see what was right in front of them. What about the Windrush? That isn't just a scandal, it's a heartbreak that unfolded in living rooms and kitchens across Britain. Picture a man who's lived here since he was a child, working, paying taxes, raising kids, suddenly receiving a letter saying he's not British enough to stay. He loses his job, his home, his medical care. He tells his friends there must be some mistake. But the mistake becomes a nightmare. Some people died never knowing why their country turned on them. And then the children placed in home office hotels, kids who crossed seas alone, hoping for safety. Dozens disappeared, trafficked, gone. Not because there wasn't a warning, but because the warnings weren't treated like human lives were at stake. And then we had social services, Rotherham. More than 1,000 girls abused, many from loving homes, and when they reached out for help, they were told they were lying, exaggerating, or choosing the wrong lifestyle. We teach children to say something. If they're scared, we tell them adults will listen. But when those girls did, they were silenced, sometimes gently, sometimes brutally. Victoria Klimbe, baby P, two small children who needed protection so desperately and instead slipped through the cracks that should never have existed. These were not children no one saw. They were children no one believed. So why do these failures keep happening? When you look closely, all these stories, different decades, different institutions, share the same heart-breaking threads. Vulnerable people are easier to ignore. Children, migrants, patients, tenants, they don't have power. And society listens least to those who need help most. Whistleblowers pay a price for caring. The people who spoke up in these scandals weren't thanked, they were punished, moved aside, threatened, dismissed. When truth became dangerous, lies became routine. Institutions protect themselves before they protect people. Reputation over reality, image over honesty. Don't say anything that makes us look bad. Becomes more important than are people safe. Compassion gets lost in bureaucracy. If you've ever tried to report a concern, you know the feeling, being bounced between departments, forms, processes. And behind every piece of paper is a person hoping someone will actually care enough to help. Listening is treated as optional. Almost every scandal had warnings, every one. Someone raised the alarm and the alarm was ignored. That's the part that hurts the most, the knowing, the pleading, the waiting and the silence. So what do these stories teach us? When you look at these scandals, not through headlines but through human eyes, you see something simple and devastating. People were failed by broken systems. They were failed by people who stopped caring. A police officer who dismissed a grieving family. A housing manager who shrugged off mould. A hospital leader who feared bad publicity more than unsafe wards. A home office scandal who saw a case file, not a person. A social worker whose warning was buried under bureaucracy. And here's the hopeful part. In every one of these stories, real people fought back. Families who refused to be silent. Doctors who risked their careers. Residents who organised. Journalists who refused to let the truth die in a file drawer. And because of them, the country saw what was broken. These stories remind us that institutions don't exist in buildings or badges. They exist in choices. Human choices to listen, to act, to care. And when those choices change, when compassion beats bureaucracy, when truth beats convenience, when leadership becomes humanity again, then maybe these stories won't keep repeating. But until then, we remember the people behind the scandals, not just the failures, but the families, the children, the neighbours, the patients, the ones who deserved better and the ones still fighting so no one else goes through what they did. So I hope you found that. I'm not even quite sure what the word is I'm looking for. I'm hoping that the way I'm reading these stories, it's much more impactful than, you just listen to the news or, just information. I find when you put an incident into a story, it becomes more relatable. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make these very serious incidences more relatable, more impactful. And I hope I'm doing a good job. And that's all for now. You take care now. Bye-bye.